Still, President William Ruto has dismissed as baseless any talks about regional political kingpins that throws the spanner in the works into the political current landscape, especially at a time when politicians allied to his Kenya Kwanza side and led by his own deputy Rigathi Gachagua is aggressively advancing the regional politics agenda. Ironically, rekindling his pre-election pet subject, he's off the calf remarks at the state banquet in honor of visiting King Charles III and Queen Camilla at State House is a paradigm shift from the past. NTV's senior political affairs reporter Ibrahim Karanja puts this into perspective.
Said in jest at the state banquet for King Charles III and Queen Camilla in State House Tuesday, the remarks by President William Ruto, terming as baseless contests for regional political kingpinships, was not out of the blues. It certainly had deeper political connotations and reflected the position of the head of state.
I did inform His Majesty earlier that in Kenya there is a concept called kingpin. And there is a contest for kingpins around Kenya. Different regions have different kingpins. And there is a vicious contest for this kingpin position, which literally amounts to not so much. But this week, all contests about kingpins have been suspended because the king himself is in town.
Observers argue that by bringing out the discussion, the president intended for the message to be heard and to especially permeate through the ears of those advancing politics of regional kingpinship. Interestingly, Ruto's terming of politics of kingpinship as amounting to not so much is a contrast of his own brand of politics. In laying his bid as a potential president, Ruto first carved out an image of the main political pointman in the Rift Valley, gathering the region in one basket, and later he launched an onslaught on Mount Kenya for the same position. His disapproval of the kingpin debate coming at the height of an evident contest between his deputy Rigathi Gachagua and Kiharu MP Ndindi Nyoro on who ought to be the political figurehead of the mountain region, with Gachagua counting on his position as the senior most elected leader from Mount Kenya and Nyoro counting on his youthfulness, eloquence and razor-sharp political acumen to claim the throne.
You can continue doing your analysis. You can continue writing headlines every day. That will not distract me and the leadership of this region to work towards the unity of purpose for the benefit of the people of this region.
And to indicate that the same talks about kingpins has entered the Rift Valley was an altercation in Bomet County in which supporters of Governor Hilary Barchok and Senator Hilary Sigei clashed. That plus conversations in Nandi County last week over the kingpin talks. Talks that have attracted disapproval from President Ruto, at least going by the statement. Yet to still rubber stamp Ruto's own upheaval against any kingpin debate was his action in February this year, in which he banned MPs from having regional groupings. The ban on regional parliamentary caucuses, believed to have been triggered by the decision by the MPs to elect their own preferences into the East Africa Legislative Assembly (EALA) instead of a list endorsed by the Kenya Kwanza coalition during a parliamentary group meeting in State House. Yet still, the dismissal of regional supremos by Ruto is seen by pundits as a way of self-preservation, as his political ambitions remain alive, having only covered 1 year of his potential 10 years in office. Ibrahim Karanja, NTV.
All right, thanks, Ibrahim, for that report. Well, time to take a look, a very brief on what is happening in the papers this morning as well. I'm not alone in studio, however. I'm joined this morning by Dr. Ekuro Court, Party Leader, Third Way Alliance. A very good morning to you, Doc. Good to see you. I hope the rains didn't hamper your way to the studios, right?
Not at all.
All right. Dr. Mark Matunga as well, technology televangelist. Wow.
But I wanted to know what is that.
Yeah, exactly. We all had to Google that.
Not televangelist, technology evangelist.
Oh.
Simple English. Somebody who promotes technology.
Technology evangelist.
Yes.
Okay. Promotion and advocation.
It's very simple.
All right, all
No,
right.
no religious connection.
Oh, yeah, because I thought there was some religious connection to that too. All right. Karibu sana to the studio, and thank you for joining us. So just very, very briefly, we'll be having a look at the papers to see what is captured there. But our conversation will be centered on the issue of the economy and, of course, the equation that surrounds our economy, the cost of living, some of the government policies, and the shadow of corruption. These actually coming out of some statements that were made by the Controller of Budget on Monday before the National Dialogue Committee at the Bomas of Kenya. We'll be touching on that a little bit, and then we'll get into a conversation. However, on the Daily Nation front page, top senators and women representatives, you can see a number of faces there. This is according to a poll on approval ratings, and you have newly elected senators performing better than their more experienced counterparts 1 year after coming into office, according to that InfoTrack poll that has also found that a majority of women reps have their work cut out to win over voters like Okiya Mtata from Busia, scoring quite high, 59%. Kirinyagas Kamau Murango at 56%. We can see other familiar faces there: Aaron Cheruyot, Dan Manzo of Makueni, John Medhu, Joel Nyutu. You can see Julius Murgor there of West Pokot as well. In terms of the women as well, you can see Turkana's Ngitit Cecilia, who is scoring quite high in terms of their approval rating as well. Bensuda Osogo from Homa Bay, you've seen her quite prominently featured in the news as well at 49%. Also, Maina Jane Njeri, that's from Kirinyaga County as well, scoring quite high in terms of that approval rating. It's a full story on page 8. And also just on the front page, King Charles III now off to Mombasa after city tours. And this means that yesterday was the conclusion of his tour here in Nairobi, with some stopovers at the Commonwealth War Graves in Kariakor. And then we saw him at the United Nations in Gigiri. And now the King and his wife, Queen Camilla, have joined the British and Kenyan military personnel to remember the contributions made by Kenyan troops in the First and Second World Wars yesterday. They did lay wreaths before the King presented replacement campaign medals to 4 veterans of the Second World War. All right, so they will be heading to Mombasa. We have our teams on the ground who will be telling us, you know, what we expect him to do there in Mombasa. Quite an interesting itinerary. Dr. Ikuru Okot, I mean, for the first time, I mean, we're seeing, you know, King Charles choose to visit Kenya as the first, you know, Commonwealth member state in Africa out of Europe. This is, does it have any significance?
Well, I think there are a number of things you can say about that. Number one, I think the royal family are not very newcomers into Kenya.
Right.
You remember the mother, the late Elizabeth, came here as a princess and left as a queen. Right. Following the death of the king. The king. So, so they're not very new, and King Charles has been here before. Kenya is a very beautiful country, by the way. I mean, if you travel many countries in the world, we have a lot that can attract anyone and anybody from anywhere in the world. But over and above that, a lot of people do not know that actually the British, especially the royal family, are probably some of the biggest landowners in Kenya. Mm-hmm. Including, for example, if you think about Old Pejeta Farm in Laikipia, you know, ranch rather. So, of course, they have interest in Kenya. And I do recall when we were doing the Constitution of Kenya 2010, mm-hmm. Writing the chapter on land and environment. That's one of the chapters that actually caused jitters, especially among the British, you know, the British government. And the reason was basically because they have interest in huge tracts of land in Kenya. Right. So I am not surprised at all. But I think I also just want to caution Kenyans. There's a lot of excitement about the king visiting, and probably what prospects are there for Kenya. The truth for the matter is he cannot even bind Kenya and the British government, you know, in terms of any goodies, whatever. Anybody who can do that is the Prime Minister, the elected Prime Minister of Britain. So
who heads the government?
Who has the government? Right. So him is just head of state, a symbol of that.
Does the ceremonial visits.
So to expect him to give in some goodies or whatever, I mean, I think that is a far dream. But I must also say that I listened to his speech very briefly. Mm-hmm. For me, it's regrettable that he never really offered an apology you know, for the atrocities the British colonialists committed on Kenyans. And I want to draw parallels with the former Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd, who publicly, nationally, and say globally apologized for the atrocities caused to the Aborigine people. He never used the word that King Charles used, oh, we regret and acknowledge. Regret and acknowledging is not really an apology as such. But I think if we were to say we apologize for the wrongdoings that we commit to the people of Kenya, I mean, now you can see there are communities that actually suffered. West Pokot has come out. The Pokot community has come out to say that you know, the British tortured our people.
We saw the Kipsigis elders as well. The
Kipsigis, see also the Turkana have come out. Right. Of course, the Kikuyu and the rest. So all these, I don't know I don't know whether he can actually overlook all that, because there is deep-seated historical injustice that was caused by colonialism. Correct. That now is being the first country in the Commonwealth that is visiting. And those issues are still there. I mean, remember not long ago, the Mau Mau took a case to the UK. Right. And we don't know, actually, I don't even know the extent to which that settlement went on, because after that, we still hear mamas, people complaining about, I mean, anybody is welcome in Kenya, whether you are king or just an ordinary English. But
you're saying by falling short of actually making that public apology, you know, that sort of doesn't give the accountability that needs to be, you know, taken into
absolutely
what the British did.
You know, if you have to also draw parallels, say, from the Holocaust. All right. The Jewish people, there was the Jewish people are properly compensated, you know. The same thing that today we have not really received a proper apology or compensation for slavery, and we have not received a proper apology and compensation for colonialism, because over and above just colonizing these territories, there are actually human rights abuses, atrocities that were committed. Right. And I think in the interest of forging, you know, collegiality between countries and you know, good relations, it's also important we recognize that fact. All right. Yeah.
Dr. Matunga, your thoughts on the King's visit?
Thank you, Zainab. I want to actually take a coin with both sides. There's the good side and there's the smooth side and the rough side. The reality is that I'm aware that the king didn't want to actually offer an apology, and I think we know why. Because if he did, then we would now very quickly accelerate the reparations, and Wakili here knows that full well, I was hoping that actually he would have done that, because Wakili is my friend. I know he would join the legal team.
So that means by actually making the apology, it opens up space fully.
No, that's
for issues of reparations, compensation specifically.
Absolutely, right. That's exactly what would happen. Because you'd extract it from that apology, then you follow on the reparations. But I still think that reparations will eventually happen. Right. Maybe even if it is not my generation, but I'm hoping and confident that actually at some point it will happen. But you know, the other good side of the king's coming is because of our economic outlook extracting from tourism. That is a good vote of confidence for us as a country, than tourists, regardless of the economic situation.
So the optics of it.
Well, I mean, that's a good side of the coin.
All right.
King Karibu.
although already there are complaints around the increase on
the SGR fares.
No, park fees. I mean
the park fees, yes, which increased
it's very
quite
discouraging.
heavily.
And now I can see whether King Charles comes here, I'm not sure he's automatically open our parks for visitation, but there is also that element of internally. Right. We are actually kind of prohibiting people from visiting the parks. Yes. And debate already is raging that tourists are actually going to Tanzania and other countries, Zanzibar. I read a very sad story the other day. Was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? A couple that had come wanted to get married in Kenya, and the bride had to leave a wedding gown, at the airport, because the immigration guy said that this gown is costs so much, so it can only be taxed. And it's a very sad story. We shouldn't be hearing such stories over tourism, and I hope that maybe Prince Charles can convince Ruto to rethink that policy.
Hopefully, but I think we also have a lot of bad manners, just within us as Kenyans. Right. There are basic things that we actually have to do. We don't have to, but it's okay with a light time.
All right. Just also very quickly, just to give a glimpse of what else is there. It's now the time for KCSE candidates, of course, as they now face the examination papers. I think that's from next week. KCPE exams came to an end yesterday, and that was the end of the last batch, by the way, of the KCPE candidates here in the country as we move forward to the next curriculum. And of course, a number of issues that also came out of that. We'll be touching on that later on in our subsequent bulletins. And also, Ruto to buy 1 billion land for coast squatters. The government is set to acquire these parcels from absentee landlords, says the president, as he starts his 5-day working tour of that region. And he's also expected to launch several projects, according to a statement from State House. He's already in Mombasa. And of course, what is expected today is to launch that 2 billion fishing port in Shimoni, that is in Kwale County. Meanwhile, Ruto-Raila talks team also retires to write their report. Negotiations between President William Ruto and opposition leader Raila Odinga nearing the end, with both teams expected to retreat to consider submissions and prepare a report. National Dialogue Committee, co-chaired by Majority Leader in the National Assembly Kimani Ichung'wah and Wiper Leader Kalonzo Musyoka, setting the 22nd of November as the deadline to hand over the reports, and Kalonzo Musyoka ruled out any possibility of extending the talks. And I quote what he said. He said, "The cost of living has been a big issue. We have met with economic experts. They have given their views. We want to meet with National Treasury officials on Monday, who are the ones implementing the tax proposals, so that we can hear their side of the story." This is also what we'll be having a discussion on. This is the 10-member team, all right, expected to engage the State Department on Housing on Monday, also next week, on the impact of the Housing Fund levy and the cost of living. Economic experts who appeared before the committee earlier this week, identifying increased taxation as a contributor to the rising cost of returns. Meanwhile, if I get to the Business Daily, Taifa Leo, this is what is captured. Hapa ni wapi mwalimu wa math anauliza handisheki asalimiana na mfalme Charles watatu kwa uchangamfu, huku Rais Ruto akiwatazama. Hapo awali naibu rais alikuwa amesema ameweka mitego kona zote ili Raila asipenye ikuluni, lakini Raila alipenya ikuluni. We can see that picture there. That's they say kiongozi wa Azimio la Umoja Raila Odinga anasalimiana na mfalme Charles watatu, huku Rais William Ruto akitazama wakati wa dhifa katika ikulu ya Nairobi mnamo Jumanne jioni. All right, perhaps my panelists would like to say something about that. But also, joining us this morning as well is Irene Otieno, Executive Director at National Taxpayers Association. A very good morning. Good to see you.
Morning.
Welcome to the studio as well. And maybe, you know, just very quickly, Dr. Matunga, alipenya ikuluni.
You know, our politics is just comical. And very interesting. Yeah, but Kupenya, it might have gone there by a chopper, parachuted in. But I don't think Rigathi or Rigiji meant that he couldn't allow him to go in.
Technically.
It's only that he was just saying that he would know when he goes in. And I think even from Germany, he would tell that, yeah, Raila is now moving. Amepita gate 2, gate 3, akaingia mpaka ndani.
Dr. Ukot, what do you think?
I just consider it was entertaining the crowd. So at the time he was saying that, State House is a public, property. Any Kenyan can go, and certainly Raila didn't have to penya. He was invited.
There was no kupenya.
There was no kupenya.
So ile mtego amekewa.
Ile mtego hata alikuwa kuna.
Irene, perhaps you want to make any remarks on this?
Yeah, just to say he's a leader, an exemplary leader whose contribution to the country has been immense.
Right.
So as my colleagues have said, it might have been entertainment, but it might also have come out with a bad touch, because I think his contribution to democracy in this country is something important, but on a light note, though, as they say.
All right, all right. So that's what we have in the papers this morning. If I can just also look at the Standard, it's all about the Form 1 slots nightmare. It's on the education sector. Record number of candidates having set this year's KCPE. The reality of crowded facilities in schools. Parents now staring at a tough time placing their children in Form 1, even as the impact of Treasury's delay in disbursing 22 billion capitation hits home. And on the Star, still on matters education, school fees paying as state reduces funding. With 6,952 slashed, a school with 2,000 students will have 13.9 million budget hole. That is something we'll be also having a conversation later on during the day. Business Daily. Inside Kenya-Uganda Gulf fuel deal fallout is what is captured on the front page. Kampala picking UAE supplier in protest. And now Kenyan oil marketers to take a big hit on that. But also, very importantly, that a story that certainly will be forming a part of our conversation is on the issue of debt servicing. There you can see Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndung'u. And debt servicing costs up by 216 billion on weak shilling, which means the Treasury has revised the cost of servicing Kenya's external debt for this fiscal year by an additional 216.7 billion on account of the continued weakening of the shilling and rising interest rates on commercial loans. The 2023-2024 supplementary budget showing that the allocation for external interest payments have increased from 146B that was tabled in June's budget to 272B, an increase of 125.61 billion shillings. So external debt redemptions normally rolled over with via new loans have been revised upwards by 91 billion. Those are the technicalities of that. But the higher cost of keeping creditors happy has come against a ground of lower than expected. Let's see. As a third page of, it's a full splash story there on, let's see, where is it? On the Business Daily, okay? I was on which page? Let me see. Page 3, all right, page 1, page 2, page 3, all right. So that's the story, and we'll be getting to that. It's on the backdrop of the revenue collection, and of course this is deeply deepening the government's fiscal hole. And before we get into that conversation just deeper, I want us to have a look at this report that was filed by Sydney Chazima on what the Controller of Budget had to say on Monday with the issue of actually expenditure and public spending. Then we'll be back.
Critical issues that were...
As the National Dialogue Committee nears the tail end of its sittings, several economic experts made their submissions on how the skyrocketing cost of living can be lowered. The Controller of Budget, Margaret Nyakango, in her submissions, revealed some government measures she believes have led to the high cost of living, lifting the lead on deep-rooted economic blunders by the government.
Poverty.
One of the thorny issues raised lingered around budgeted corruption. Nyakango says that compensation from the Consolidated Fund Services for all state officers was exaggerated 3 times, raising questions whether the austerity measures the government says it has put in place will work.
I found out that my salary was budgeted at 3 times what I'm paid. So I asked them, why is the budget showing 3 times what my annual salary is? And it was like that for all the state officers.
What was the answer, madam?
Chairman, I have not received the answer to date.
According to the Controller of Budget, there is a need to reduce deficit financing, which has necessitated over-borrowing by the Treasury.
We know that we are in a cash crunch. But this cash crunch, ni ile ya kujitakia. Because, like I told you before, we have been borrowing and partying with borrowed money. That is why we are where we are.
The Controller of Budget also faulted the government's move to increase taxes on basic commodities.
Looking at the prices of kerosene, the price of makaa, the price of cooking fuel generally, is a really sore area because no one can do without it. The third thing I would be looking at is VAT on food. Now, when we introduce VAT on unga, a staple food, then you know the very lowly are going to suffer.
We thought it would only be fair.
The co-chairs of the Dialogue Committee, in their response, differed on the role of Parliament in addressing the high cost of living.
Kimani is Parliament and Wandai is Parliament. Is under capture, state capture. So you shouldn't expect much from them. And this is why we have to really go deep into these things.
We have been bold enough to deal with some of these issues touching on the economy. And I believe history will judge the 13th Assembly different from other assemblies of all the units that they so built.
On the Housing Fund levy, which has now contributed to the shrinking employees' payslip, the Controller of Budget called on the government to ensure its success, appearing to call out the president over unfulfilled promises.
Now, what happens if every time you speak to someone, they do not keep their word? I think you will not be in a position to trust them the next time they speak. Why I'm saying this is that I keep my ears open a lot of times when people are arguing, my friends on the golf course and all that, and I hear them saying, who tells you we'll get these houses?
Submissions over the implementation of the affordable housing program will be tabled on Wednesday. Sydney Chazima, NTV.
All right, so very quick thoughts before we go to a break and then come back to a much deeper analysis. I'll begin with you, Dr. Okor. I mean, the Controller of Budget speaks of issues of borrowing and parting with borrowed money, unfulfilled promises, unsustainable debt. Are you shocked by some of those statements and revelations by the Controller of Budget? Her salary budgeted 3 times higher.
You know, this is not new. And I'm really, really happy that Controller of Budget Margaret Nyakango has brought these issues up. This has been ongoing for the longest time. In fact, theft of public money begins at budgeting. And it's the parliamentarians actually who orchestrate and design how money is being stolen. For example, let me just pick one example of the National Youth Service. We all know now, it's in the public domain, that the National Youth Service, especially in the last administration, has lost upwards of about 9 billion Kenya shillings from the scandals. But every year they still give the same institution and many others money. So it's the budgeting committee in Parliament that actually designs how this money is being stolen. And therefore, when this money is exaggerated, then it goes to the tenderpreneurs who then know that, okay, there's extra money here and we are going to get that money through the tenders. And of course, the other thing that is being overlooked by Parliament, and for me, the biggest culprit actually is Parliament. If you look at the Auditor General report, the Auditor General report makes findings after auditing government institutions, counties, whatever, for 6 months. And when they make those findings, it is the parliamentarians that now convert those findings into audit queries. That's when they summon the governors or whoever it is to ask them questions. Right. They shouldn't. That report, in my view, should outrightly go to the DPP for examination. DPP then should be able to determine whether an offense, theft of public money, has been committed or not, and then send the same thing to DCI for investigation, and people should be charged. That way we will end up corruption and theft of public money. So she's absolutely right. This is what has been happening. It is parliamentarians in cahoot with the Treasury that actually design how money is being stolen.
Right, Dr. Mutunga.
And I'm not surprised that, yes, we borrow, but we spend them on parties like
because suddenly there has been that conversation. Is it a revenue issue or is it an expenditure issue? But she talks of that, we've had budgeted corruption.
It's all a design from the beginning. And I think, I don't want to exonerate my crowd, and that's the private sector. We are the ones who actually facilitate all this. All that money that is stolen, one way or the other, is stashed in the banks. And one thing that I have never understood, and I'm not a student of economics, why for the last 7 years, actually about 8 years, banks have been posting huge profits. And we say that we are in economic hard times. How do they end up posting those huge profits. Why? Because the stolen money we keep in those banks, whatever it is that we do. But the truth of the matter is that corruption is designed from the start. And you'd find that actually when a member of parliament, and I've seen a lot of these things, whereby, you know, they're telling you, hey, you know, give me this road, put this road for me in the budget, and then something happens, that tender is given. So it's a design all the way from the very beginning of the budgeting process. Then when you come to issues of tender, and Irene here and my friend Alcott would confirm to you that if you're looking at the papers and trying to figure out if there's a tender here that you want to actually apply for, it's too late in life. If you didn't write it, you didn't win it. So tenders are even basically designed and written by those who are actually supposed to earn them. So the whole architecture of our finance manners is horrible. It's already skewed from the beginning. It's horrible. Right. Irene?
I think what the controller of budget has said and noted is something that we as civil society organizations have been speaking about. We have been doing an analysis of these audit reports from the controller and from the auditor general, and the concern is it becomes recurrent issues. So there isn't addressing of those recommendations within the reports, and that's why I would agree with my colleague that Parliament is dropping the ball. These things should be investigated. But over and above that, I think what also the controller has mentioned is when you look at how much we are pampering in terms of some of our state and public officers, and most of these people are only 17% of the Kenyan population, but the bulk of the Kenyans and taxpayers are also in the private sector that you've mentioned. Right. So in terms of redistributing the taxes that are collected, problem. So for her to mention that issue, I think doesn't come up, because you cannot be speaking of adding NHIF 2.75%, you have the housing levy, but we are equally hearing these conversations brought about by the controller. Then it means there are too many seepages, and so probably, as you're saying, it's not a revenue issue first. We had better first address our expenditure and redistribution of the tax collected before then we have the conversation around increased taxation.
But you said Parliament has dropped the ball on this. We should be looking at Parliament, who will be focusing on what the controller of budget said. But it was more of an astonishing moment that, oh wow, that happened. But now
what the Auditor General has done for them, if you're not addressing what we've mentioned here as budgeted corruption. So, and I'm happy that now the conversation comes as a country where the finance bill has to be passed at the same time as the budget. So then the question would be, we are not passing this Finance Act unless we redress what was in the last. So I think parliamentarians have a wide powers given to them legally, but that is not being utilized by them for selfish interests.
All right.
Zainab, yes. I have to say two quick things. Last week I had a very deep conversation with a friend who is a parliamentarian. And one of the things he told me was shocking. He told me that actually we don't have a parliament. Parliamentarians are for sale. They don't read this motion, they don't read these reports. All they ask is the president, when do you want this bill signed? When do you want it voted? That's exactly how they operate. And if you look at, for example, the impact on our economy, let's go back to the finance bill, which is now the law, the Finance Act. There is really a disconnect between the Finance Act, which is a money collection law, and the Appropriation Act, which is the money expenditure law. They are not incongruent with each other. So you find that the Finance Act is actually that design of how corruption has been designed on how the money is being spent. How the money will be stolen. But when it comes to expenditure, which really should be about how we benefit the people of Kenya from the Act, there's a complete disconnect. I'm not an economist, but this is some of the lessons I've learned recently speaking to some of my friends who are economists. Right. So we have a parliament that really does not look into the welfare of the people of Kenya, does not read these reports. It's just interested in its own personal interest. And I think that's where actually the crux of the matter is, that we do not have representatives of the people. Because when you look at the state of the economy today in Kenya, and I don't want to talk theories because I can't even speak theories because I do not know, but I just look at the life of an ordinary Kenyan today. vis-a-vis the state of the economy. I'm telling you, people, children, women, mothers, the elderly are going to bed hungry. They cannot put food on the table. The situation is actually so bad out there. Even from food alone, we go to matters medical, education. Earlier on you brought about the issues to do with education, KCSE and all that. And I always ask myself, why is there so much celebration about children sitting for KCSE, the results, but you don't care about what happens to them when they pass, after they finish those diplomas and the degrees? How do you factor them into the job market? So we are not seeing that. And you can see Kenyans are even commenting on this show. Some of my friends have sent me and told me, ask this question. President William Ruto is, publicly saying that I'm going to Saudi Arabia to sign this bill, sign that, so that Kenyans can get jobs. But Kenyans are saying, we employed you to work here to stabilize our economy so that the economy can grow here in Kenya. You don't grow the Kenya's economy by going to sign agreements out there to send some border or some people. That doesn't grow the Kenyan economy. Kenyan economy must be grown when we put proper structural policies in our own country, exploit every economic opportunity in all the 47 counties of this country, and that's how we create a vibrant economy, and that's how people can be able to thrive economically. And
I want you to hold on to that, because when we come back, we will be having a discussion on that, on whether the trips by President William Ruto have any impact on the economy, and of course the foreign direct investment here in the country. Does it have any impact, and of course does it change the lives of Kenyans moving forward? Let's take a short break here on AM Live. We're going to be back in a short while. The hashtag is MLiveNTV at NTV Kenya. You can also X me at Zainab Ismail. Stay with us.
Including politics, expert opinion, and breaking news. Settle for more content in great packages on any device. Subscribe today for exclusive premium content. Visit nation.africa. Nation.africa. Positively premium content. Visit nation.africa. Nation.africa. Positively empowering society.
Going back into European competition, and into the Champions League no less, was a long time coming for Newcastle fans. The chance of a run into and through the knockout stages might leave some of them feeling a little greedy. Except Newcastle has put itself in position to do just that, even after suffering a disappointing home loss. Being consistently competitive, beating the elite teams and rising to the top of the Champions League might be one of the hardest tasks in football. Now consider Newcastle's place in the Champions League. Returning after a gap of 21 years and drawn in Group F with PSG, Borussia Dortmund and AC Milan.
Win a 3-bedroom house in Nanyuki sitting on a quarter-acre or a 30K weekly shopping voucher or a monthly plot. For every 100K you spend buying or paying for your plot, you earn 1 entry to the draw. The more you invest, the more entries you get. Bamba Nyumba na AMG.
Welcome to Crystal Rivers Mall, the ultimate shopping destination for every lifestyle. This Sunday on Property Focus, get ready to embark on a journey throughout this extraordinary mall where shopping meets excitement. We look at the different state-of-the-art facilities that they have on this mall. Get ready, get tuned in on Property Focus this Sunday at 5:30 p.m. only on NTV.
The Motindum liquid electronic device reaches every corner, giving your loved ones a peaceful sleep. Together, we can fight to end malaria. Motindum, Kenya's #1 choice.
And all right, welcome back to the program. You're watching AM Live this morning, 58 minutes past 6 a.m. as we take a look at the state of the economy in the country, touching on a number of issues. Of course, the cost of living quite high. Inflation, in fact, has also gone high, according to the latest data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics just about a couple of days ago. We'll be giving you an update on that as well. I'll also be showing you an analysis that was done by the Business Daily about a week ago as well, in terms of the purchasing power of Kenyans that has dipped in just the past 1 year. But Dr. Matunga, where we left off was on the issue of the president's trips abroad that is expected to make a change. Something is supposed to help us in terms of our economy, job creation, to tackle the unemployment rate in the country. But has there been any impact on the economy on the president's trips, specifically through foreign direct investment? Or is it something that we need to sort of just wait out a little bit more to actually feel the impact of it?
Zainab, I want to pick it from where my friend Alcott left it. He's from Turkana. To some extent, they have water problem in some ways. I'm from Lake Victoria, Mfangano Island. We also have a water problem, too much of it. So either way.
From both ends?
Yes.
Right.
I tend to hold a slightly different opinion from Dr. Okot when we are now addressing the issue of the president's trips.
Right.
As Kenyans, one way or the other, we're still going to actually blame Ruto. If you just sat in State House, you're like, hey, we are Mecca too.
What are you doing?
He can't even go to the US, can't even go to China. He's not even making these trips. So what is he really doing? And when he makes those trips, we also now blame him. Flying president. We call it what, 38 trips?
Right.
39 so far. The last one being Congo-Brazzaville.
Maybe Mfangano Island, because he was there on October 7th.
That's within Kenya.
And I was here, I think, about a month ago, when there was the grilling of the president one more time around the trips that he makes across the country. So either way, damned if you do, damned if you don't, because we were saying, oh, he's making too many trips across the country. And now he's making too many trips across the world. And then if he's just sat in State House, what is our president doing? I'm a car to State House. But specific to your question, the answer is yes, in the sense that there is a ripple effect, there is an economic benefit to some of these trips. I say that with very clear thought that it's not an electric switch. It's not an automatic switch that, hey, I've gone to Saudi Arabia, I've switched on this button, and so this money is actually going to flow. We have to wait a little bit for some of those agreements to actually mature. And yes, foreign direct investment, we don't live in isolation. We live in a global economy, and everything that happens anywhere affects us here. Yes, we're talking about jobs, and that is why I was holding a slightly different opinion from Dr. Okot. It's okay for the border guy to be transported to Serbia to do some work there, because look at the amount of money that actually usually comes in from our friends in diaspora when they actually send that money back into this country. That is crucial. And let's open up these opportunities, regardless of what kind of level of a professional is or a occupation they are. I'm aware of the interest of a lot of Kenyans to be actually, let me not say shipped, but to travel to Europe to actually patch up the job gap there. That's beneficial to us. We don't have an economy that actually can absorb all of us in gainful engagement and employment. And my last point here, where I fully agree with Dr. Okot, and I'm sure my sister here will also agree with me, is that we are approaching the issue of economics from a very amorphous point of view. And we have a lot of quirks. We have quacks even in the legal profession. We recently had a very successful lawyer who hacked it, right, and faked it, and was also successful. But the way I measure this economic issue is I look at my kinsmen at the village in Mfangano, the youth in the village, the old mamas in the village. The Kenya Kwanza government brought in something that I think it was Mudavadi who brought it into the conversation of Pesa Mfukoni. If this youth and this lady in the village, this woman in the village, this mama, this auntie of mine does not have money to spend, there's no way you can give me what economic matrix and tell me, oh, Kenya is doing well, 5.3% growth. That's hogwash. Let
me ask you, what are the indicators of economic stability?
I've just given you an indicator.
Which is the purchasing power.
The ability of my auntie to be able to buy food.
So that's the biggest indicator.
That to me is the primary indicator.
Right.
The primary indicator. If they can afford food. And then we keep talking of free primary and free secondary education. All of us sitting here, including yourself, I don't know how many people ask you for school fees.
Plenty.
I mean, why are we still paying school fees? Why do we have to be taxed? And my sister here is the head of...
Overtaxed.
Yeah, I mean, it is... We are still being taxed to pay school fees. And you have to, because it addresses... You know, our country has to pay school fees for a lot of Turu chicks, I mean, and Turu boys, Turu girls. Waturu bado wanataka pesa from him. He has to send money to his village. I have to send money for school fees to a lot of people. I'm going home on Friday, and I can tell you 90% of the people who will be coming to me will be school fees. And school fees of 3,000, 2,000, 5,000, mutanakwambia kuna balance ya hii. In fact, I had one of the students coming to me crying because of balance of school fee. So for me, the way to measure economic progress over country, over community, is when that lady, who is not necessarily my mother, because my mother I can take care of, that lady who is not my mother can be able to actually feed her children and take her children to school.
Right. And I mean, Irene, if I look at, this is an analysis that was done by the Business Daily on the 26th of October, and it talks about 1,000 shilling buying power has now dipped to 850 shillings in a year. All right. In terms of fuel that lasted a week now lasts about 4 days. 100,000 shillings Anna has 10,380 shillings less than what they would anticipate. All right, so a Kenyan who had 1,000 shillings not to spend in October last year can only buy goods worth 850 shillings today due to inflation, a weakening currency, and taxes, among other factors that have conspired to erode the buying power of the shilling. And what Dr. Matunga said, the biggest indicator, the primary indicator right now on the issue of economic stability is the purchasing buying power of Kenyans. It has completely been eroded.
Yeah, that's very true, because not even just from the papers, from my own personal experience, as we said, going for shopping is a nightmare, where you have to balance, what do I take, what don't I take, what is important. So things we used to take for granted, we can barely get them. And the trouble now is that is also the people who are middle class, so to speak, who felt like they were comfortable. So you can imagine what is happening to the people that are lower down in terms of income. And I think the worrying thing, this is a problem, yes, but I equally think that as our purchasing power goes down, then we also need to ask ourselves, what else is government providing for us? Because if I was to use my 1,000, it has gone to 250. Fair enough, we can say many external issues here and there, but then the state of essential public services should have gone a bit up, that I don't have with the same 1,000 to buy medicine for my family, which government should be providing healthcare, the education that he's mentioned. So I think the taxation and the control of budget mentioned taxation of essential commodities in the family. That is problematic. We've had the discussion with the finance committee, and we've been able to table different pathways, because we cannot sit here as citizens and say we don't need to resource the country. The country must be resourced. And I think it's good to also just put it in perspective that we are almost at, is it 14% of tax to GDP? Other countries are at 30. So that means, and those are developed countries, I think that would be put out, those are developed countries. But this means that our countries will continue to ask for tax. But now the question then is, how are we redistributing the tax, and where is it going to? If Kenyans were being taxed, and I think colleagues have said overtaxed, but you would then say that this is going to essential services, that the state of our healthcare is much better, because now you're taxing someone, even with the NHIF paid up, this person will still go and buy medicines out. And to bring it a bit closer, also having conversations with our Finance and Planning Committee, we asked them, how do you say you're reducing capitation, or how much you're giving to universities? But when you look at per diems, which goes to our public and state officers, the answer we were told is that spurs economic development, the money that we give this. So when a policymaker tells you that, you wonder, would you build an economy by simple per diems, or do you build your economy, particularly when it's agricultural based, by ensuring that that sector is fully resourced, by ensuring irrigation is working, fertilizers are there? So I think from the start, there's a lot of lazy policy making, because I did not expect to hear that from a policymaker. And when you're looking at the erosion of the purchasing power of citizens, but the money that Kenyans are being hard taxed is going to a few people, but is going to even very, not core sectors of this economy. So I think my suggestion, and I'm hoping some policymakers are listening to this, is that we need to make hard choices as a country. Particularly, our state and public officers need to agree not to be very comfortable, some perks that they were used to. And allow me to mention a few engagements we've also had with the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, where they've been trying to reduce some allowances. And this has been heavily shot by, forget even state officers, public servants. There are some allowances that we feel are not right, because how many public servants are in this country? So I think there's need for the conversation I'm hearing there's now a need for us also as citizens to agree to be each other's keeper. You cannot have the core having so much and other citizens not having enough. Would we rather not balance this and ensure that public services are strengthened, but everyone has something? We cannot as a country be speaking about some households not having food on the table, and there's too much excesses on the other side. So I feel we must reevaluate also our values. Sometimes I think we put too much blame also on the political class. Fair enough, they've done quite a bit. But when I look at the context of public servants, there's another area that we need to have that conversation with them. How much also are they drawing from the government budgets, and how many are they relative to the other people that we are now aggressively as a country moving towards taxing in the informal sector? So I think there's a deeper conversation, but just to bring it back to what you had asked, the purchasing power has been seriously eroded, and the impacts are very dire, which then, when we look at it from the newspaper, it looks abstract, but this means food missed on the table, people missing essential medicine, people have lost life on diseases that really, in this day and age, we should not lose Kenyans to. And we also need to look at also the mental state that households are having. Are we even having unity in households simply because of this issue? So I think it looks economic, but the ripple effect, as you're saying, is completely serious.
Right. Dr. Okot, yes.
There are two things I want to say. I mean, I don't want Mark to get away with this. I have no problem with the president traveling out of the country. I think two things that emerge. One, there is no explanation on the value of these trips to the people of Kenya. Number two, I don't think we can now assume that us going out of the country through our president is what will develop the country, Kenya's economy. Because the president himself said that going out there will help me, I think, take Kenya, move Kenya forward. There are many Kenyans who disagree with this, because Kenyans are saying, we employed you to fix the economic situation in our country. For example, we need to create room for manufacturing and to empower SMEs in this country, probably even in all our 47 counties of Kenya. Because I'm one of the persons who believe that there's an economic opportunity in each and every of our counties, and all we need to do is industrialize that economic opportunity. In fact, luckily, Mark and I come from regions where there are so many, I mean, there's too much fish. Sometimes I joke that the fish from the Turkana die out of old age because there's no manufacturing, there's no industrialization of that fish. You know, I mean, today, even in the county of Homa Bay, we have a serious fish processing plant with even value addition that will create many job opportunities. We are not doing that. Making these trips and going out there and signing agreements, it's okay. But what is the value to the people of Kenya? And I want to relate that to the state of our economy. Because what is now manifestly clear in our country is overtaxation. But how do you overtax our people when the economy is not vibrant enough for them to be able to go to do jobs, to earn money so that they can be taxed? You know, if you are to look, for example, at countries like the Nordic countries, I mean, Sweden, for example, I have got some friends, they actually pay, I think, close to 70% taxes, almost 70%, and they don't mind. Why? Because everything else is free. At retirement, their life is taken care of. I mean, today, if a Swede national here needed medical care, an air ambulance will come and pick that Swiss national back to Stockholm or wherever they are. So the question then is, when we talk about these indicators, from our own micro level, I'm talking about my relation with my villagers, my relatives, who actually are saying, I need food, I need money for medicine. Of course, you ask yourself, what then is the role of government if all this burden is actually shifted on us?
So the micro environment is not favorable.
And over and above that, Zainab, right. If you look at the way the government is going about managing matters economy, the overtaxation is actually targeting the middle class, who in my view are actually the job creators. When you overtax the middle class, you know, during COVID, for example, let's pick the example of COVID. During COVID, for example, many of us had to rethink about whether we want to run our offices the way we're running them. Because then it affected whether, can I still employ 2 drivers? Can I employ, you know, a gardener? Can I employ a messenger? So you have to cut. I mean, you have to send people away. And that's because the middle class in this country, the people who have got capability to create job opportunities, are being punished by the state. So if really government wanted even some bit of help, go easy on the middle class.
So do you think the government needs to sort of rethink its existing tax structure and reform it to a different, you know, structure?
Because you can see, Zainab, when I, for example, send money to my relatives in the village, they don't really necessarily pay taxes the same way we pay taxes. The only way they pay taxes is maybe when they go and purchase that packet of milk, bread, and that's very, very minimal if you ask me. But the people actually, the middle class here, are the people, in my view, who government should actually empower, you know. And like Irina has said, today we have to rethink. There are times we used to pay our school fees just one leaf, check leaf. Now we have to stagger them. You know, and even the schools now understand we cannot push parents to pay school fees maramoja. I used to go and just tell the pump guy, jazz a tank.
Now you cannot afford
to. Now I cannot do that anymore. You know, and many other things. Mortgage.
Okay, let him just wind up.
Yeah. So I don't want Dr. Aukot to get away with this.
Okay, you can rebuttal then.
And I know Irene will respond because I'm sitting here and saying we need to pay taxes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me start it from there.
We do.
Actually, if we can push it to 70%, that's okay. The problem is the structural issue that we actually have, whereby all of that money, that's what we started with, all of that money ends up in pockets. It doesn't come to actually to serve us. Paying taxes should not be an issue. The percentage of how much we pay should also not even be an issue. So long as our taxes come back to actually fix our roads, come back to pay medical. I mean, I was just sitting here and a message has come in of somebody who is in a hospital in Kisii who wants me to actually chip in. Why should I actually do that? Why? Because our tax money that I'm paying is actually not going to sort out health issues.
So it's not about the taxes. It's about how we're spending the money that we're collecting.
The money that we collect. That to me is the problem. Because, I mean, our court has just given an example of the Nordic countries that they pay 50, 70%. And they have no issue with that. Why? Because that money actually translates into the service that they need and they want. So that whatever little you have left, you actually spend on your luxuries or buying food and things. But then there's something that also Dr. Aukot did mention about President Ruto's trips. Yes, we want Ruto to actually sit here and fix our economy. And we want him to actually help with the investment in setting up industries. But how will that happen if we actually don't also reach out to investors? Because I'll ask Dr. Aukot or Irene here, what industries have they set up in their own villages to actually run the economies in those places? We don't have access to that.
But Zainab,
we don't have that kind of money.
Zainab,
right.
So without due respect,
what's going to happen? Okay. No, I'm not attacking you personally.
No.
But what's going to happen? He needs to go out and be able to actually engage and woo investors to actually come in and set up those industries.
But is the environment
in Lake Victoria?
But Zainab,
and yes, the environment that he needs to fix, he doesn't have to actually sit in State House for 2 years.
What serious investor will come to a country where corruption is our middle name?
But that's what we need. Then that's what we need to sort out.
Mark, listen.
That's what we need to sort out.
What serious investor will come to a country where, first of all, there is poor infrastructure, and when an investor comes and wants to fix infrastructure, they are told by the same government officials, I need 30% stake in your company, because that's a fact. What serious investor will come to Kenya when there is overtaxation almost in everything? That's why today, as we speak, we can pretend, we can bury our head in the sand like the proverbial ostrich, but investors are actually moving out of Kenya, going to Tanzania. I just came from Tanzania not long ago, I mean a few months ago, and they're very happy there. So what in serious investor will come to Kenya when really the justice system is so delayed in terms of litigation and all that? So I think we really need to rethink, and I don't think, Mark, you should be encouraging our president to be working from outside Kenya. Our president should be able to work from within Kenya. I mean, I would rather even the president visits regularly all the 47 counties of Kenya and say, okay, what industry are we creating here? And, you know, what comfort are we giving to investors? I mean...
So you're saying fix, you know, the house, and by fixing the house, then you have investors who are looking out from outside and thinking, maybe I need to invest in this country.
But over and above that, even if you were to give some credit to Mark's argument that yes, the president needs to go out there. Of course, he can go out there. But where is the accountability for what he's doing out there? The other day, he himself came out clearly and said that he's cutting MPs' allowances and that he's saving about 500 million, which he wants to redirect to, I think, was it tertiary education? Okay? I asked a similar question to him on social media, of course. Tell us also when you will cut your foreign trips and how much money are you saving and where are you redirecting that money? Because the trip of a president is not the same as a trip of a member of parliament. The president spends more money. First of all, remember, he flies a private jet with all that entourage. So that's a huge amount of money. Now that he has come out in the open to say that I'm going to save 500 million from MPs' allowances, not cutting the trips. He said, I'm cutting allowances, not the trips. But he should also come out and say, I am also cutting down my trips and I'm saving XY amount of money and I'm going to redirect them here. But honestly, I think we shouldn't really reduce the running of our country to foreign trips going forward. That shouldn't really be the conversation we should be having as Kenya. We should be telling President William Ruto, you know, in 2022, you campaigned on the basis of a plan of action. And I will repeat it here, Zainab, in your show, because I've repeated it elsewhere. President William Ruto is not a newcomer in government. This is probably the longest serving elected politician in the history of Kenya. From 1997 to date, Ruto has never lost an election. So when he comes and says, I have a plan to fix this country, it's believable. Yes, and many of us believed him compared to the rest of the guys. So I think to now start shifting goalposts and say, oh, you know, I need to go out of the country, I need to do this and that so that I can fix this country, it is political conmanship. And I think it's a lie. And I think the sooner we realize that and be able to say, okay, let's fix our problem. Because honestly, Zainab, even if you read the Auditor General report, and maybe Zainab, Irene can explain more this. Do you know how much money is being stolen from just what we already have? If only the president can actually just stop that, he does not need to make many trips to go and sign agreements.
Right. Irene, yes.
Yeah, just a comment. I think I agree with both parties, but looking back at some of the investment that have been brought in by governments, even in the previous, a lot of those investments have been the ones that later corruption has crept in. So that for me is another issue. Is the government-led kind of investment the pathway to go? Because inbuilt within it has been a lot of corruption and kickbacks. Secondly, also has been the quality of those opportunities that when government goes to negotiate. When we've heard about taking our people to the Gulf, you look at how much they are paid, look at even the human rights state of where some of our people are going. We then need to ask ourselves, is it even worth it? We might say, yes, people don't have food on the table, but I think as a country, there's also the pride and the sovereignty of our people that we also then need to look at. My third comment on that also is then, what's the role of private sector? I've also seen a lot of private sector bringing in this investment. So where do we strike the balance? What is the role of government? And which one is better? We've seen private sector negotiate huge sums brought in agriculture. So I think then we need to balance. Is it something that the president should be leading, and at what cost? So I think those are all things that we need to unpack. How much are these trips costing? And if you look even at the private sector and after post-COVID, how to do meetings and negotiate has changed. I don't believe all of those trips had to be physical trips done there. With support from tech, and particularly a country that is saying we don't have so much, I'm thinking the person you're negotiating it will take you more seriously if you're saying, I won't fly, might probably just fly for the preliminary discussion, but subsequent, there's a lot of tech that can be done. So I think if we are saying we don't have money, let us act like we really don't have money, but not be a nation that says we don't have money, but on the other hand, we are throwing it all out there. So I think these are all wrong signals that the government is saying, but we need to audit. We can't constrain, yes, the presidency from moving and doing that. It can be done in a cost-effective way, reduce the entourage that is going, and also really give us, I think it's a public interest issue, how much is one trip costing? Let's do the math. Exactly. And then saying, if you're and that's why I say our austerity measures seem to always affect the lower people, but not the top level. So I think it's imperative for the president to know and ask how much has been the cumulative cost of my one trip, multiplied by the 39, and ask himself, what would this mean to health sector? Because the money that he's going for a trip means 2.5, speaking for myself, 2.75% in an NHIF, so to speak, fund. It's a pain in people's pay slips that is only for other people flying. So I think we need to understand that public funds is a painful thing to the person paying. I think the value of money in Kenya shifts. When it is when you're taxing, you get it. But when it's the people flying, it becomes like it's just paper. But that money has come from people's lives and sweat. And I think that's what we really need to understand. And then respect public funds and not see it as a playground where politicians, everyone else, tenderpreneurs descend. We must look at public funds as something that is the shared contribution of our people and then should be redistributed to the interests of the people and not private benefit.
Zainab,
yes, before.
By the way, it's not rocket science to fix the economy of this country.
But remember, there's the debt issue, by the way, also.
Yes, we will. But you see, there's one thing that is not being said, and I want to say it publicly, because I advise some clients who want to come to Kenya to investors. Let me tell you, one of the biggest deterrents for investors to come to Kenya is the greed with the decision makers. You know, an investor wants to come, they want to put in money, billions and billions, create job opportunities. But the red tape, the approvals, you know, the demand for a cut in their, you know, let me tell you, we are just a greedy country. It's unbelievable. Somebody will tell you, I want, say, 10 million US dollars, because a client of mine has been asked such amount of money upfront. I mean, you've not even started the job. You've not even invested. So honestly, the truth for the matter is, if we can just change a little bit of bad manners and behavior in government, there will be an avalanche of investors in this country, in every part of this country. And let me tell you, Kenya's economy will grow very fast. But there is that thing that is not being spoken of. Red tape in government in approving investors. They will frustrate an investor demanding for money upfront, you know, commissions and all that, and that really, you know, kills the spirit of investing in any country.
All right, Dr. Yes.
Isn't that what we need to cure? Instead of actually sitting here discussing whether the president has made 39 trips or 38 trips, really, because to me, that is where the problem is, and that is the item to do that, to fix that is the item we started with.
And so because fixing it is meeting directly with the investors.
For me, it's corruption. Number one is corruption, because the president said mambo ni matatu. And let me also say mambo ni matatu. Number one is corruption. Fixing that. Number 2 is corruption. Fixing that. And number 3 is corruption. And it didn't start with Ruto. We actually, as a country, our national...
Mark, let's not go there, Mark. Please, Mark.
No.
You know,
but
allow him to finish.
But I'm not going anywhere.
This excuse of saying, oh, it didn't start with Ruto. You are now in the driving seat. Don't tell us there was a driver before. We used to drive this car. So now you are driving the car.
But he talks of a systemic failure, structural failure.
And this is what we actually have to deal with. You know, we are talking of even these politicians who have been brought in. Most of them are not serving their first term.
That's true.
They've been there, you know, for years and years. You know, my friend here, Okot, is a politician. I'm not saying that he's...
I'm a lawyer, first of all.
You know,
law is what feeds me.
So, to me, the problem that we need to fix, and to this, I'll take it to the president. I'll take it clearly to the president. Mr. President, mambo ni matatu. Fix issues of corruption. Number 2, fix the issue of corruption. And number 3, fix the issue of corruption. We fix that. That is the deterrence to investors that Dr. Okot is talking about.
All right.
I mean, for him, even if he sat down at State House and we say that, okay, fine, he needs to do Zoom calls and do Skype calls and do what, we'll start calling, these guys, same guys here will come back and say, he's a Skyping president. We didn't elect him to actually do Skype. We elected him to actually engage these guys. Dr. Okot just mentioned that, hey, you know what? He would not have a problem with the president visiting 47 counties. I was on this show, and that was a headline on your paper, that the president is traveling too much, visiting different parts of the country. We're still going to have the same problem. For me, the biggest issue is corruption. And of course, there's money that was actually devolved. Dr. Okot here was the CEO of our new constitution, and I always, you know, credit him for the role that he played. We brought about devolution. Money goes to the counties, and that money actually hangs there. It doesn't trickle down to the villages, and I'm sure that is not what they invest. It goes to the counties to pay salaries, and the rest of it actually goes to corruption. And when these people at the counties get their corrupt money, do you know why they take it? They bring it back to Nairobi and buy houses here. So, I mean, even if you stole that money, why don't you even invest in the
I want you to hold on to that.
So what we need to fix, which I think we should agree on, is corruption. Hii story ingine ya flying presidents, that will help us.
Just a quickly join.
Very quickly.
Yes. I actually don't have a problem with the president traveling wherever, but I think he cannot also just be a traveling president. He is also employed to work in Kenya. That's a fact. Number 2, we have structures. Why then do we have embassies, economic attaches in all these countries? Empower them. You see, the problem with our politics, Zainab, is the personalization. That the personification, I mean, the politics is like supposed to be seen from one person only. Trust me, if I was the president of the Republic of today, you'll never see me cut some tapes, opening some small thing. I mean,
what did you be doing?
Yeah, probably doing the bigger things, setting up policy agenda.
Actually, going out there to try and fix the economy. Allow me to just very quickly take a break, because we've almost arrived. Then we're going to be back with this conversation. So yeah, let's hold on to those points. M Live NTV. We're going to be back in a short while. Stay there.
Baby girl, si unakumbuka leo ndo ile day ya bashing yetu tulisema tutaenda. Usikose?
Ai, mimi nikose. Ai, mbona gari ni KDB na kwa app imeandikwa KCW?
Sasa wewe kwa nini uko na maswali sigiste? Si haja bora ufike. Teni kule kichwa.
Little. Safe, reliable, and convenient rides. Download Little app and start riding today.
When you're finally released from pain, that moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
To get Moyo Wangu by Guardian Angel, dial *812*799#.
Skiza, Non-Nation.
On this episode of Thamani,
when we started in 2016, it was actually kids-only salon and barber. I felt the barber side was not bringing in what I expected. So I decided to shelve the barber first, focus on the beautiful girls, and see how it goes with time.
All these and more on Saturday at 5:30 p.m. Thamani, showcasing resilience and exploring scalability.
Win a 3-bedroom house in Nanyuki sitting on a quarter-acre or a 30K weekly shopping voucher or a monthly plot. For every 100K you spend buying or paying for your plot, you earn 1 entry to the draw. The more you invest, the more entries you get. Bamba Nyumba na AMG.
All right, welcome back to the program. You're watching AM Live as we take a pulse check of the state of the economy today. And of course, just touching on a number of issues, including the issue of the cost of living, but also most importantly is on expenditure and also corruption here in the country. Look, we have our debt obligation as a country. And if I was to break it down from, how economists have broken it down to a more understandable language. So for every 100 shillings that we, collect, 72 goes to servicing our debt, right? So we remain with very little money. But Irene, when we're looking at that very little money, it's not put to good use at the end of it all. So then that brings us to the same big issue that I think Dr. Matunga has talked about, Dr. Okot has mentioned. It's the issue of spending this money, and you touched on that a little bit. On our focus should be on state and public offices as well, and also county governments. Why is nobody looking at the issue of how county governments are also spending their money?
Yes, I think in this whole conversation we forgot to also zero in on our counties. So rightfully, we've also looked at audit reports from counties, and that area is still problematic. Similar to what we've said, and say the National Assembly has been dropping the ball, the county assemblies also need to up their game in terms of looking and calling out corruption based on the reports that are brought to them. But there is a lot of the same issues we're having at National Assembly are the same issues that are playing out at County Assembly. The politics and party affiliations take center stage over and above the interest of citizens. So yes, counties are losing a lot of resources on corruption based from those reports. And so there is that need to have that conversation within the Council of Governors, also have this between the intergovernmental relations. But as you've also spoken about the issues of debt, yeah, that has been eroding a bit of available, not a bit, a lot of the funds. And as you've said, you've given it in a simple way for citizens to understand. And we've been told that we shouldn't be looking at the numbers because there are other developed countries that even have higher debt to GDP. So even without looking at the numbers, because there's been a lot of conflict where we've been told Japan has a higher one and they're okay, what is your problem?
So I think it shouldn't be a comparison.
again, I'll say I'm not an economist, but we've been told you cannot compare different sizes of economies, but there are already thresholds where we are told these are the safeguards for your debt to GDP. But also from our Auditor General, they've also mentioned the accountability of that debt. So even if we leave the amounts and the percentages, are we able to show and tell us this is where the Anglo-leasing funds, this is what this funded, this is what the Eurobond funded? So those are the questions that also the Auditor General has mentioned. But we are looking forward to see what happens, because now we have a committee specifically looking at debt at the National Assembly. It's still a National Assembly, which you said has a lot of issues, but I'm hopeful because I sit here as also a member of the Okoa Uchumi Coalition, whose main conversation has been issues around debt. Do we then say, as a country, we ought not to pay some of this debt because it seems to have been paid, procured for individual purposes, didn't come into our consolidated fund? So is this an odious debt or issues around that? So you've done quite a bit of advocacy around this area. So we are looking at that and also having our eyes moving forward and asking ourselves, is this current committee on debt acknowledging the faults that have happened and the lapses within how we acquired previous debts, and what are the lessons learned moving forward? But
do you think it's a problem for us that up until now we don't have a sort of consolidated debt register? We keep hearing different numbers, you know, 10 trillion. What is that? That's a murky area that we're still yet to really figure out as a country as well.
True, because if you can't quantify and we are not all agreed on the amount, then you can't even have a pathway to say, so this is how we are addressing
accountability.
Exactly.
Right.
So those are conversations. We say a debt register that is public and people can know it was acquired for who negotiated this debt, how was this applied, what are the terms even of this debt. So I agree with you. The debt register is a key aspect. Debt accountability around it, how we acquire the debt and how we use the debt. These are critical issues that as a country we still haven't addressed.
All right. And Dr. Okot, yes, even until now, there are some, you know, SGR contracts we have to see as a country. We've been asking for that for a very long time. But we know we are paying that debt.
You know why we don't have a debt register? And for me, it's very, very sad that as a country that claims to have all these structures, the treasury, the central bank and the rest, that we can sit in the 21st century here saying that we don't have a debt register, yet at the same time we say we have a debt. It's very shameful. You know, very, very disgusting, to be honest. And it tells you we don't have actually institutions of government. That government has been personal. And you know why? The reason we don't have a debt register, Zainab, is because the people who go to negotiate these debts actually have a cut in it. They negotiate for a commission in it. I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, it's not rocket science. And these things are not a secret. Many people fell out from each other because of the SGR deal. We know the players in that because some people sneaked into China, negotiated this deal, and because the Chinese were just interested in, in business, they didn't care what you're going to do back home. They pay you, and that's why. And therefore, going back to the accountability of government, it is not enough, and for me, it's very insulting to the intelligence of Kenyans when a whole minister or a senior officer in government says we don't actually have a debt register. Then create one. You know, create one. SGR, expressway, whatever. Create one. I mean, there are so many economists who are working in the Ministry of Finance, Treasury. Are you saying that they are unable to actually just assemble, put together a debt register? You know, and the other thing, Zainab, which is really lacking in our conversation around this issue of debt, because let me take a very simplistic example. When you, for example, take a mortgage facility with your bank, and I remember during COVID, many of us went back to the bank and told the bank, you know, kimeumana, things are not very good because of, of COVID and all that. You restructure your loan with the bank. How is it that we are not talking about restructuring our debt, our national debt? You can still restructure with whoever lends you the money. I don't think anybody out there will say, no, we cannot restructure. Unless, of course, those contracts are written in such a funny way that because it protects the people behind it. And I would have expected...
But we are beholden to very strict conditions by the people who lend us the money.
Listen, I'm a lawyer and I write contracts all the time. It doesn't mean that in a contract, in a contract, you cannot renegotiate or you cannot bring an addendum to a contract. For most importantly, Zainab, I would have expected Parliament of the day to be able to debate some of these public, in fact, there's a provision in the Constitution, can't remember very vividly, but there is a provision in the Constitution that national contracts that bind the country must be debated on the floor of the House. If I'm not wrong, must be, I think, Article 71 of the Constitution of Kenya. Those contracts must be debated on the floor of the House. Now, we are not seeing this. So what we are therefore seeing is a failure of at least two institutions, Parliament and the executive. Because it's the executive that goes out there, according to Matunga, that they must go out as much as they can to sign this contract. But then they don't bring these contracts. They don't table these contracts on the floor of the House or for cabinet to be able to debate them. For the people of Kenya to know, this is the situation we are putting you into. It's an accountability issue. And it's very clearly stipulated in Article 10 of the Constitution of Kenya, national values and principles of governance. One of those is accountability and integrity. You cannot run away from that. And if you're running government, really, there is no excuses. So at least tell us, are you restructuring these loans? What is taking us so long from just putting together a national, a debt register, really?
You know, Zainab, the disclosure issue is an important one.
Right.
I think on all of these debts. That I agree fully, and I think that is important. And the reason we are keeping all this information and we don't even have a debt register, in fact, it's shocking, is just because we are cultured to actually promote bad manners. But I want to strengthen a point here that I made earlier. And let me pick it from some numbers that the former president threw out there, that we're losing 2 billion
every day.
Shillings.
Every single day.
Every single day. What does that come to in a year?
700 billion.
730 million. And let me just break that number down just one more stage. We have about 1,400 wards. If you were to divide that money and send it to ward, each ward would receive 520 million every year. Think of what that money can do for local economy, employment, development, and everything. And so when I'm sitting here talking about corruption is the issue that we need to deal with and to actually also fix our economy. And I agree with my colleagues here that it's not rocket science because I think we are dealing with a lot of quacks. But let's not forget, we're dealing with a lot of quack economists, but we are blaming the elected leaders. But let us not forget that we have civil servants who have grown in the system and know how to actually beat the system, cheat the system, manage the system, and do whatever else that the directors in government, because the minister come, the CS come, or the PS come, and there are Mr. CS hapa tunafanyanga namna hii. Is that what you want facilitated? Hiyo tutafix namna hii. That person remains there, and we don't elect that person, do we? No. That person sits there for 30 years, 40 years, perpetuating that same thing. And so it's not just basically the elected leaders, but it's also, because the elected leaders are the ones that we see. But the technocrats that we don't see, those are the ones that actually earn and have money that they can't explain where they got it from.
Just even the other day in a book launch, I was looking for that statement. The former anti-graft body chair, PLO Lumumba, said corruption is a crisis of ethics in the country. So he talks about the issue of morality as well. So lack of morality. So it goes back to, yes, we might look at it as a systemic structural issue, but it's perpetrated by greed from individual levels.
Yes, absolutely. And that is what we actually tried to cure. And that's why I'm proud of our Constitution 2010. That's what we tried to cure with issues of dealing with national values, bringing in integrity. What is lacking is actually the goodwill, the leadership goodwill, the political goodwill to actually go to the extent of actually dealing with issues of corruption, up to including the electorate, because we continue to elect those same people. When my friend here tries to run, I get red. So we don't elect them, but I'm not exonerating my crowd, and that's the private sector. you know, I mean, we play a huge role in facilitating these corruption.
All right.
But Zainab, a question must then be asked, and maybe Mark or Irene can answer this. Yes, you brought in the argument about these unseen people who are really doing the bad things behind the curtains. But we also know the top leadership of this country, or the leadership in this country. Who then should we hold accountable and responsible?
Is it Parliament, perhaps, in terms of oversight? They are an oversight institution,
no, you see,
perhaps.
If, for example, and like I said, and I use this example of William Ruto not being a newcomer in government, not that he does not know some of these shenanigans, things happening behind. Because at the end of the day, if this country collapses, it is him who will blame. Okay?
So the buck stops.
The buck stops with the presidency, with the top leadership. Buck stops with parliamentarians. We should be oversighting government, we should be legislating properly, and should be able to represent their constituents. So, of course, the buck stops with the top leadership, because some of these people, we do not know them. We don't see them. They're not on the front line. So the people who really must take the blame. Like today, we blame President Uhuru for huge national debt that he left. You know, it's not like he was all over. You know, today even President William Ruto should be able to ask himself the question: why is corruption a constant feature talk in our country?
Right.
What is it that I can do to fix that? The president, in my view, or not the president, but the national executive of this country must be able to follow the money, you know, to the counties. If I'm giving county X billions of cash, and they have said, I'm going to build a hospital or a school, and we don't see that school at the end of it, and the Auditor General has returned a report saying, you know, you are this vote head saying you're going to build this school. Where is this school? It's not there. Where is the documentation? Not there. That person has stolen. I mean, and in fact, for me, Zainab, I've many times argued, let's stop using this word corruption. Because even in our own respective mother tongues, well, what is corruption? If you ask me what is corruption in my Turkana, I can't find that word. But if you ask me who is a thief, I can relate to it. If I give you money, Zainab, to go and build a school, and you're not able to account for that, I can't see the school, the money has also disappeared, what have you done? You have stolen. So you're actually a thief. You must just be charged under the normal criminal law. And the moment we see people actually going to jail for that, and I think as a president, as the national executive, I should not shy away from actually picking the Auditor General report, call DCI director, call DPP and tell them, listen, look at this report. Billions of money went to this institution. The auditor has taken 6 months, because normally it takes 6 months. In fact, ni kama anawabembeleza watu, tafadhali, hebu leta hii barua iko wapi. Yani ibembeleza them. By the time he puts down that report down, he has actually made a finding that money is lost. Why is that person not charged? Why is that person not going to jail? The moment we begin to punish thieves of public money, not the corrupt, let's stop using the word corrupt. Thieves of public money. That's when, Zainab, this country will take a different route to prosperity.
All right. Interesting, because even, I mean, we just ran a report when we began this broadcast on the issue of the National Assembly Chief Whip Silvana Sosoro, who's expected to appear before the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Why? So on Monday, he made remarks in Bometa. He was captured claiming that he receives a cut from members of parliament who wanted to be, you know, included in trips sponsored by Parliament itself. Irene, as you make your winding remarks.
And you didn't lie.
I keep saying that those are just the honest things they're telling us, yeah? So just telling us what we already know. But I think we need to look at the bigger pictures we've said.
Right.
And personal responsibility for anyone who steals. Let me now use the word as we've been guided by the legal. So personal responsibility, and I think it says that in our law. So in as much as we're saying the National Assembly, this would be a lot of work also for the National Assembly.
Right.
So I think the investigative agencies, who are many, we've talked about the EACC, we have the DPP, we have our own judiciary, should then let us see that high level, is it the principal secretaries are the accounting officers? So for me, that is where the buck stops. If you're a principal secretary in an entity that has received public funds, the law says that you'll be held personally responsible for that. Right. So how many top level people have we seen? I think if we set the tone from up there, then others will follow suit. So we've talked about the technical people that have been in the system for long, but if we are able to breathe life into that provision and see a lot of these high-level people taking personal responsibility and returning the money, I think that is what the law says. You're personally responsible, and we seize your assets and get back what was stolen from Kenyans. I think that is where then we'll be saying we are serious about corruption, but not the national dialogue. So I feel like that this is a very lazy or a simpler approach. But if we just look at that legislation, see a few, 5 or so, that should set the ball rolling. And just as you said, as we wind up, I think for me to just underscore that tax should be looked as a sacrosanct issue and say this is money that is people's sweat, not money that because the law allows you to pass a finance act, you look at it as a government and say we can access. But if we have that respect for public funds, I think when we do our planning and our budgeting, then those issues that PLO has mentioned, ethics, morality, justice, because I feel corruption is just here, but you can do something that is legally okay, but it's not just in terms of how much are you taking against your neighbor. So let's look at it as a corrupt issue, but also a justice and a morality issue, and for the public good of citizens of Kenya to address issues of misuse of funds.
All right. Dr. Matunga, your final thoughts very quickly.
Number one, let Ruto travel. To as many countries, engage the rest of the world. I agree with Dr. Okot and Irene. Let's basically deal with thieves who actually steal our money. Let us pay taxes and let the taxes work for us.
All right.
I asked the president to actually take as priority whatever he needs to do to actually sort out the issue of stealing, and let the judiciary also play their part in addressing, in basically putting the thieves behind bars. On the issue of economy, I think that it is important that when we are actually doing what we must, money needs to be in the pockets of the citizens. That is the only way we're actually going to fix this economy, because we actually improve and increase their buying power. That is when we will actually improve the economy, because we'll collect more taxes. And this issue of keeping money at the top and not having that money trickle down to the common mwananchi, we will still cry. The most confused segment of our society is the middle class. These guys who wear pajamas to go to sleep. I'm waiting for a day that we will actually be able to come out and do something for this country. And now Okot will tell you that we are the ones who didn't vote for him. Because we wear our pajamas and sit and watch
and failed to make it to the queue.
We do our national duty. Come out and support this economy.
All right, Dr. Okot, very quickly.
You know, I do remember President William Ruto when he was campaigning last year. He said that when I take over government, there will be no money to be stolen. I think he meant that you know, he will deal with thieves of public money squarely. He needs to revisit that conversation, because that conversation, we no longer hear about it. We no longer hear conversation around Mama Mboga. We no longer hear conversation around the wheelbarrow guy. We no longer hear about the bottom-up approach and how that impacts in the whole economic issue. I think secondly, Zainab, I would say that the president and his advisor need to rethink. There is no country in the world that has developed economically through overtaxation of its citizens. Never. You can only develop economically when you industrialize, manufacturing, and all that, and you create job opportunities. Overtaxing people on already non-existent jobs does not make sense at all. You know, so I think the sooner the president realizes that, to be honest with you, this will collapse. On the issue of the trips, which Mark Matunga really is promoting, it's okay. The president can even go to each and every part of the globe. But you see, he goes on our behalf. But there has to be a value addition to these trips to the people of Kenya. And that is what is lacking. If we were to say, okay, if I go to this country, what is the benefit that comes to Kenya? You know, I have no problem whatsoever. But, and then of course, what we are missing also is the quantification. What does these trips actually cost us? Like he himself came out to say, when I'm cutting down MPs' allowances, I'm redirecting this money to tertiary education. But let him also tell us, how much does this trip cost to us? And if you were to save that money, where will he redirect the money?
Value for money. But Dr. Matunga said it's not just a quick switch. You don't just switch and say, okay, fine, I've gone to Saudi Arabia, this is what we're reaping right now.
You know, Zainab,
right,
that's what we used to hear from President Uhuru. Oh, it's not quick, these things will take time. Then it means you do not know what you are getting yourself into.
All right. I think that's a fantastic place to end our conversation here this morning, but still so much more to have a discussion around when it comes to our country's economy. And that's it, Dr. Ekuru Aukot. We did have Dr. Mark Matunga as well as Irene Otieno. Thank you so much for coming in this morning, making the time to have this conversation. But let's continue having it as well on our social media platforms. The hashtag is MLiveNTV, at NTV Kenya, at Zainab Ismail, and of course, we will be back with Your World. Stay with us. I'll be holding brief and fort for Winnie Lubembe. All right, so see you in a couple of minutes.